Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. My dear students, our lecture today includes the complement of thinking about the experience of audio-lingual method. We start from item 7, which indicates that the teacher uses single slot substitution and multiple slot substitution. Particular parts of speech occupy particular slots in sentences. In order to create new sentences, students must learn which part of speech occupies which slot. The aim of using these tools is to help the students to practice the grammatical structures of the target language orally and master them orally. So in this case, or in this particular drill, the students are required to learn which part of the speech occupies which slot. Point 8. The teacher says very good when the students answer correctly. Here the teacher is providing a positive reinforcement to students' correct responses in order to indicate that it is correct and it should be developed into habits. Because language learning is a process of habit formation which is done by providing correct responses with reinforcement. 9. The teacher uses spoken cues and picture cues. Students should learn to respond to both verbal and non-verbal stimuli. We mentioned that our behavior is divided into linguistic and non-linguistic. So students are supposed to know how to respond to linguistic and non-linguistic stimuli. That is, linguistic stimuli spoken by the teacher and non-linguistic stimuli or non-verbal are picture cues provided by the teacher. 10. The teacher conducts transformation and question and answer drills. Each language has a finite number of patterns. Pattern practice helps students to form habits which enable the students to use patterns. In this case, we have a number of grammatical structures of the target language. These habits are supposed to be developed by students and developed into habits according to pattern practice. 11. When the students can handle it, the teacher poses the questions to them rapidly. Students should learn to answer automatically without stopping to think. The students should work on making their target language habits as automatic as their native language habits. This means that when we use our native language, we don't think about whether what we are saying is correct or incorrect, because it's our native language. But when we speak in the target language, sometimes we hesitate to think if what we are saying is correct or incorrect. The aim here is to make the students use target language habits automatically in the same way as we use our native language habits. 12. The teacher provides the students with the cues. The teacher should be like an orchestra leader, conducting, guiding, and controlling the students' behavior in the target language. This item is related to the teacher's role in the audio-lingual method. The teacher's role in the audio-lingual method is controlling the students' behavior. He is guiding the students and directing the students' behavior in the classroom. The students follow what the teacher says. In addition to this role, the teacher should act as a model. He provides the students with correct pronunciation and correct use of grammatical structures. Sometimes he provides the students by himself or herself, teacher, and sometimes he provides the information to the students by making them listen to a tape record or by taking them to the language library in order to help them to listen to certain conversations by native speakers. 13. New vocabulary is introduced through lines of dialogue. Vocabulary is limited. The major objective of language teaching should be for students to acquire structural patterns. Students will learn vocabulary afterward. Since we work according to structural linguistics, the most important thing and the most important idea is to help the students to master the grammatical structures of the target language and the phonological system of the target language. That includes correct pronunciation, and correct grammatical structures. That's why we don't have emphasis to be given to vocabulary. Vocabulary is kept limited. Students are given no grammar rules. Grammatical points are taught through examples and drills. The learning of another language should be the same as with the acquisition of the native language. We do not need to memorize rules in order to use our native language. The rules necessary to use the target language will be figured out or induced from examples. In this case, the students are not given grammatical structures to memorize. They are provided with examples, and from these examples, the students are supposed to understand the grammatical structures provided in the examples. The teacher does a contrastive analysis of the target language and the student's native language in order to locate the places where she anticipates her students will have trouble. The major challenge of language teaching is getting the students to overcome the habits of the native language. A comparison between the native language and target language will tell the teacher in which areas here the students will probably experience difficulty. In this case, we mentioned that contrastive analysis is a comparison between the native language system and the target language system, identifying similarities and differences. This helps the teacher to expect the type of difficulty that students might face in learning the target language. That's why we have the teacher to refer to the idea of contrastive analysis. The teacher writes the dialogue on the blackboard toward the end of the week. The students do some limited written work with the dialogue and the sentence drills. Speech is more basic to language than written form. The natural order, the order children follow when learning their native language of skills acquisition is listening, speaking, reading, and writing. All skills are important, with more emphasis given to oral skills. We have mentioned this from the beginning of our explanation of the audio-lingual method. We mentioned that it emphasizes oral skills more than written skills because we acquire our native language orally first, then we acquire or learn the written form of the language. That's why the language skills are arranged in the order listening, speaking, reading, and writing, with more emphasis given to oral skills than to written skills. The supermarket alphabet game and a discussion of American supermarkets and football are included. Language cannot be separated from culture. Culture is very important, and knowledge about culture of the target language is very important for language learners. Culture is not only literature and the arts, but also the everyday behavior of people who use the target language. One of the teacher's responsibilities is to present information about that culture. So, it is important for the students to have some knowledge about the culture of the target language, and this is done by having some knowledge or the discussion of everyday lifestyle of people who speak the language natively. Now we move to another idea, which is reviewing the principles. Number one, what are the goals of teachers who use the audio-lingual method? The most important goal is to help learners to use language communicatively, and it should be learned communicatively and as automatically as we use our native language. This can be achieved by forming new habits in the target language and overcoming the old habits of the students' native language. So, in general, the aim is to help the students to use the target language habits to communicate automatically in the same way as they use their native language. What is the role of the teacher? What is the role of the students? I have just referred to the role of the teacher. The teacher is an orchestra leader, directing, controlling the language behavior of the students. Another role or another responsibility is to provide the students with a good model for imitation. That is, students imitate a model and the teacher should provide the students with a good model. Students, on the other hand, of course, the relationship is clear between the student's role and teacher's role. If the teacher is controlling everything, the students are imitators of the teacher's model or the tape, because sometimes the model is not the teacher, is a tape record. She supplies of a model speakers. They follow the teacher's directions and respond as accurately and as rapidly as possible, which means that the students should respond in a correct way concerning pronunciation and concerning grammar, and they should respond automatically. What are some characteristics of the teaching and learning process? New vocabulary and structure patterns are presented through dialogues. The dialogues are learned through imitation and repetition. We mentioned that repetition and imitation are important in the audio-lingual method in order to help the students to develop the target language habits. What distinguishes the audio-lingual method is the use of drills such as repetition, background build-up, chain, substitution, transformation, and question and answer. Also, students' successful responses are positively reinforced. Grammar is induced from the examples given. Explicit grammar rules are not provided. Cultural information is contextualized in the dialogues or presented by the teacher. Students' reading and written work is based upon oral work they did earlier. So here we don't have something new. We have explained all these ideas. We mentioned that number one, we have drills. Number two, we have extensive use or practice of grammatical structures. We have reference to the cultural information of the target language, and we have the written work to be based upon the oral work because oral skills are emphasized more than written skills. What is the nature of students-teacher interaction? What is the nature of students-students interaction? And the explanation of the experience of the audio-lingual method, we have noticed that we have some students-to-students interaction and chain drills. But this interaction is very limited and it is teacher-directed. Most of interaction is between teacher and the students and it is initiated by the teacher. Nothing is mentioned about the feelings of the students. How is the language viewed and how is culture viewed? The view of language in the audio-lingual method has been influenced by descriptive linguistics. Every language is seen as having its own unique system. That languages are different from each other. This means that the native language is different from the target language. Native language habits are different from target language habits. They should be kept separated. And the system, or in all languages, we have the phonological system, the morphological system, and the syntactic system, which are different in different languages. Everyday speech is emphasized in the audio-lingual method. The level of complexity of the speech is graded, starting from simple ideas or structures, moving to complex structures. The students are presented with only simple patterns at the beginning, and then they move to complex patterns. Culture consists of the everyday behavior and lifestyle of the target language of speakers or native speakers of the target language. What Areas of language are emphasized and what language skills are emphasized. The areas include grammar, vocabulary, and phonology. Skills include listening, speaking, reading, and writing. In the audio-lingual method, vocabulary is not emphasized, it is kept minimum. Most of the emphasis is given to phonology and grammar. Grammatical patterns. A grammatical pattern is not the same as a sentence. For instance, underlying the following three sentences is the same grammatical pattern. Meg called, the blue, Joyce won, and the team practiced. The natural order of skills presentation is listening, speaking, reading, and writing. The oral skills received most of the attention. This is not new, and I have mentioned this many times. What students write, they have first been introduced to orally. Pronunciation is taught from the beginning, often by students working in language laboratories on discriminating between members of minimal pairs. What is the role of a student's native language? This is very clear. We mentioned that we have the habits of the native language and the habits of the target language, and we should work on preventing our first language habits from interfering with our target language habits. The habits of the student's native language are thought to interfere with the student's attempts to master the target language. Therefore, the target language is used in the classroom, not the student's native language. Also, it depends on contrastive analysis between the student's native language and the target language, which will help to overcome the interference between the two language systems. Evaluation, we don't have a clear evaluation and the experience that we have observed, but in general, the evaluation of a student's performance according to the audio-lingual method is related to their ability to produce language accurately, that is, with perfect pronunciation and perfect use of grammatical structures. This means that the students are required to produce a native-like pronunciation and native-like use of grammatical structures. Finally, how does the teacher respond to students' errors? We talked about errors. We should prevent the students from producing errors. Anyway, when errors occur, we should indicate this by providing no reinforcement or negative reinforcement directly and immediately in order to indicate to the student that the incorrect responses should not be developed into habits. That's all for our lecture today. Thank you very much.